They said it so casually, like it was nothing. "We love Michael's children more. Yours don't belong here." My heart stopped, my children's hands clutching mine, their innocent eyes searching for answers I didn't have. This was supposed to be Thanksgiving, a day of warmth and togetherness. Instead, it became the night my family shattered before my eyes. I knew something had broken beyond repair, but I didn't yet realize how deep the betrayal ran. By the time I found the courage to fight back, to protect my children and expose the truth, it was already too late. I stared at my phone screen, watching the video loop again and again. My mother's Facebook page glowed with comments from friends and distant relatives. "Such a beautiful family. What a perfect Thanksgiving preview." There was my brother Michael, his wife, and their two blonde-haired children, all seated around my parents' polished dining table. My parents stood behind them, their arms draped lovingly across the chairs, their smiles wide enough to convince anyone scrolling that this was the picture of warmth. But I wasn't in it. Neither were my children. Not a trace of us existed, as if we had been edited out of the family tree. I felt the sting of absence harder than any insult. I had sent Mom a photo of my kids last week, dressed in fall sweaters, holding the pumpkin pies we had baked together. She had simply replied, "Cute." And yet, here she was posting an album of Michael's children, captioning it, "Our pride and joy." I scrolled through the comments, each one pressing deeper into my chest. "The grandkids look just like their grandfather." "Michael's so lucky to have such supportive parents." No one knew that I existed. Or maybe worse, they did know, but my parents had chosen to make me invisible. A part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity. I was 36 years old, a mother of two, with a stable career and a life I had built with sweat and patience. And yet, in that moment, I was once again the little girl who had to sit quietly in the corner while Michael unwrapped gifts labeled "For our special son." My husband called from the kitchen, asking if I wanted tea, but his voice barely registered. My eyes stayed locked on the video, unable to look away from the bright smiles that excluded us. I whispered to myself, "We're not in their family." Not really. And as much as I wanted to deny it, the truth was seeping in. Claire didn't know yet. This was only the beginning of her erasure. 2 days later, I drove my children to my parents' house with a trunk full of groceries. I had volunteered to bring pies, stuffing, and extra chairs, believing that if I just showed up with a spirit of contribution, maybe things would be different this year. The kids were excited, chattering about playing with their cousins, rehearsing which pies to show Grandpa first. My daughter, Emma, held the foil-covered dish carefully in her lap like a treasure chest. When I knocked and stepped into the familiar scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles, my mother's eyes flickered with something I couldn't place. She looked at the pies in my hands and then at my children, as though their presence were an inconvenience rather than a joy. "We don't have space for your kids at the table this year," she said matter-of-factly, as if announcing the weather. I froze, sure I had misheard. "What do you mean, no space? I brought chairs." Dad appeared in the hallway, waving dismissively. "Don't be so dramatic, Claire. You know we love them. But Michael's family is already set and the dining room's full. Maybe the kids can eat in the living room." The words slid into me like a blade. They were pretending it was logistics, but I heard the truth under their tone. "Your children don't matter as much as his." Emma's small hand tugged my sleeve. She whispered, barely audible, "Mommy, why don't they want us?" Her wide brown eyes shimmered with confusion, the kind of confusion that makes a child question if love can be withdrawn. I bent down quickly, hugging her close, hiding my tears in her hair. "They want you," I lied, my voice breaking. "They just don't know how to show it." My parents were already walking back toward the kitchen, chatting happily about Michael's new promotion, as if nothing had happened. As if telling their daughter her children had no place at their table was no more offensive than asking her to set the napkins. I carried the pies into the kitchen anyway, my body moving on autopilot. Michael leaned against the counter, his arms folded, a smirk tugging at his lips. He didn't need to say anything, his expression said it all. He knew. He had always known. He was the chosen one, the golden child. For a fleeting second, I wondered if he felt sorry for me. But then he lifted his glass of wine toward me in a mock toast, his smile curling wider as if to say, "Enjoy the crumbs, Claire. That's all you'll ever get." My chest tightened, my pulse quickened, and yet I forced a smile. Because I knew the truth. If I allowed myself to shatter now, my children would see it, and I couldn't let them believe that being erased meant they were unworthy. Still, the question echoed in me like a drumbeat. How much longer could I pretend that this was just another family dinner, and not the slow unraveling of everything I thought love was supposed to be? The clinking of glasses and the hum of conversation filled the dining room, but none of it reached me the way it was supposed to. I sat at the edge of the table, balancing my son's plate on my lap, because there truly was no space for him at the table. My daughter picked at her food quietly beside me on the couch. From the other room, laughter erupted where Michael and his family were seated like royalty in the dining room. "Look at Ethan." Mom's voice carried through, proud and glowing. "He's the future of this family, strong, brilliant, just like his father." The room erupted in nods and agreement, and I heard Michael chuckle, modest on the surface but his eyes glittering with satisfaction. Dad added, "That boy is going places. We're blessed to have him carrying on the Anderson name." No one glanced my way. No one noticed my son fidgeting, his fork clattering on his plate because his hands shook. He was 8, and in that moment, he already understood what it felt like to be less. I forced a smile when Mom glanced at me briefly. "You remember how clumsy you were at his age, Claire? Always knocking things over, crying about nothing. You were always too sensitive." She laughed lightly, dismissing my existence with a single sentence. "Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Like every accomplishment is erased, every breath you take is a reminder that you were never the one they wanted? That was me. That was every second of my childhood, repeating itself in front of my children. I wanted to leave. I wanted to take my kids, walk out the door, and never look back. But I stayed because walking away meant admitting to my children that their grandparents didn't love them, and I wasn't ready for them to carry that truth yet. Later that night, after we had driven home and tucked the kids into bed, I sat on the couch with my phone, scrolling numbly. That's when I saw it, a message notification, the screen lighting up with my mother's name. I opened it expecting some half-hearted thank you for the pies. Instead, my stomach dropped. "She's nothing without us. Don't let her forget that." The message wasn't for me. It was to Michael. A misfire, perhaps, but it burned like fire across my chest. I read it again and again, the words searing deeper. She's nothing. I was their daughter, and still, I was reduced to nothing in their private conversations. I wanted to scream. Instead, I shut my phone, pressing it so hard into my palm my nails left marks. That night, I couldn't sleep. The memories came flooding back. Every time I was blamed for a broken vase while Michael stood beside me, untouched. Every time my test scores were dismissed while his were celebrated with cake and balloons. The Christmas when Dad told me, "You're too dramatic, Claire. Be more like your brother." It was always me. Always my fault. Always my failure. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, suffocating under the weight of a truth I had spent decades trying to outrun. I was the scapegoat, the one who carried the sins of the family so they could keep their illusion of perfection. Emma stirred in her sleep, her small body twisting under the blanket. I climbed into bed beside her, wrapping my arms around her, pressing my lips to her hair. She relaxed instantly, her breathing steadying against me. "I'll protect you, no matter what," I whispered into the dark, though my voice cracked with the weight of the promise. The next morning, my son sat at the table, pushing cereal around his bowl. His usual chatter was gone, replaced by silence too heavy for a child his age. Finally, he looked up at me, his big brown eyes filled with confusion. "Mom," he said softly, "Grandpa told me yesterday. He said I'm a mistake." "Am I?" The spoon slipped from my hand and clattered against the counter. The air left my lungs. My boy, My beautiful boy was asking me if his existence was an accident because the people who were supposed to love him had told him so. I dropped to my knees beside his chair, holding his face between my hands. "No," I said, my voice fierce despite the tears blurring my vision. "You are not a mistake. You are everything. Do you hear me? Everything." He nodded, but the doubt lingered in his eyes, the kind of wound that words alone could not erase. And as I pulled him into my arms, one truth crystallized within me. This poison was no longer just mine to endure. It was spreading into the next generation, and that I could not allow. The dining room glowed under the chandelier, the table dressed in gold runners and polished silverware. Laughter echoed as wine glasses clinked, plates were passed, and Michael's children were showered with praise after every word they spoke. My children sat quietly beside me, small, polite, almost invisible. I told myself to survive just one more Thanksgiving dinner, but survival wasn't enough. It happened suddenly, like a blade cutting through the noise. My mother's voice rang clear above the chatter. "We love Michael's children more. Claire's kids don't belong here." The words didn't hang in the air, they detonated. Silence fell, followed by an awkward cough, a clink of a dropped fork. My chest tightened, my pulse roaring in my ears. My daughter's eyes widened, her lip trembling before the sob burst free. My son buried his face into my side, his small body shaking. I stood frozen, my fork still hovering above my plate, unable to breathe. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but the strength drained from my legs. My parents continued as if they hadn't just annihilated the fragile illusion of family. Dad nodded, adding, "It's nothing personal, Claire. You understand. Some children just shine brighter." Every laugh, every memory of trying to belong collapsed in on me. Across the table, Michael smiled faintly, eyes lowered, pretending discomfort while his wife patted his arm. He was enjoying it, every second of my humiliation. My daughter's cry broke the silence fully, her voice slicing into the quiet. "Why don't they love us, Mommy?" she wailed. Gasps rippled around the table. My mother shot me a cold look, as though my child's pain was my fault for not teaching her to stay silent. I caught sight of my cousin Anna, seated near the corner, her phone angled slightly downward. Her eyes met mine for a split second, pity flickering there, before she looked away. I didn't realize until later that she had been recording. I couldn't stay. Not another second. The walls felt like they were closing in, the chandelier above mocking me with its perfect glow. I grabbed my children, murmuring something incoherent, and stumbled out the door. Rain lashed the windshield as I pulled away, wipers screeching against the storm. My children sobbed in the back seat, and with each mile my own tears fell harder. Their cries bled into my memories, dragging me back through years I had buried. I was 7, standing in the kitchen beside a shattered vase. Michael had knocked it off the counter, but Mom's eyes locked on me. "Claire, why can't you be careful?" Dad's belt hung heavy from his hand. Michael watched from the doorway, untouched, the golden boy. I was 12, bringing home a B+ on a math test. Mom glanced at it once before tossing it aside. "Michael got an A in science," she said, clapping him on the shoulder. "That's real achievement." I was 16, crying in my room because no one came to my choir recital. I heard the cheers from the stadium next door where Michael played football. It was always him, and it was always me, less, smaller, unworthy. I thought I had outgrown it. I thought adulthood, motherhood, my own family had freed me. But in that dining room, it had all come back, sharper than ever. When I pulled into our driveway, I sat in the car, paralyzed. My children clung to me, their eyes swollen and red. "You are enough," I whispered fiercely, cradling them both. "You are mine." I kissed their damp cheeks, pressing my forehead against theirs. "You are mine." Later that night, after putting them to bed, I opened the folder where I kept every document related to the money I had sent my parents over the years. Checks, transfers, receipts. They had insisted it was for their retirement, their safety net. My stomach clenched as I stared at the latest bank statement. Tens of thousands gone, redirected. A house had been purchased, but the deed was in Michael's name. My vision blurred, anger and betrayal merging into something I couldn't name. They had stolen not just my dignity, but my sacrifices. Every dollar meant for their care had been funneled into my brother's empire. The phone buzzed on the counter. A message notification lit the screen. I opened it with trembling fingers. It was from Anna. "Claire, I thought you should see this. I recorded what happened tonight." Attached was the video. My mother's words crystal clear, my daughter's sob piercing, the silence of the room undeniable. The perfect family image shattered in less than 2 minutes of footage. I sank onto the couch, my chest heaving. The video could destroy them, their mask, their pride, their golden image. For the first time that night, I felt something other than despair. It was power. For days after Thanksgiving, I moved through life in a haze, like the air itself had thickened around me. I cooked breakfast, folded laundry, tucked my children into bed, but every moment was colored by the echo of my mother's words. "We love Michael's children more. Claire's kids don't belong here." The video Anna had sent remained saved on my phone, burning a hole in my pocket. I replayed it when I couldn't sleep, both torturing and fueling myself with the truth that could no longer be denied. One night, after the children were asleep, I sat alone with my laptop, searching the words I had never dared type before. Toxic parents. The results flooded in. Articles, blog posts, thousands of stories on Reddit threads, confessions whispered into the void of TikTok. I clicked one video, then another, and another. Strangers looked into their cameras and described my life without knowing my name. Favoritism, scapegoating, gaslighting, erasure. I pressed a hand to my mouth, trembling. For so long, I had believed I was the problem. That if I could just be less sensitive, less demanding, less me, they would finally love me. But here were voices, hundreds, thousands, saying, "It's not you. It was never you." I typed a post myself, anonymous, shaking as I hit send. "My parents told me at Thanksgiving that they love my brother's kids more." My children cried. "I don't know how to breathe through this." The responses poured in. "I've been there." "You're not alone." "This is abuse." Then one comment stopped me cold. "Your parents match every sign of narcissistic abuse. I know because I escaped too." I leaned back, my heart hammering. It wasn't just dysfunction. It was abuse. Naming it didn't make it easier, but it made it real. And real was something I could fight. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I opened the drawer where I kept bills, receipts, and financial records. I spread them across the table, building a map of betrayal. The transfers I had sent over the years, the polite thank you notes from my parents, the missing money, layered with screenshots of their text messages, the bank deed in Michael's name, and now the Thanksgiving video, the pile grew into something undeniable. The more I dug, the darker it became. In a file from the bank, I saw my own name, my social security number attached to a loan inquiry I had never made. My hands went cold as I read it twice, then 3 times. My parents weren't just taking from me. They were planning to sign more debt under my identity, debt that could ruin me. I sank into a chair, clutching the paper. For a moment, rage threatened to consume me. But beneath it, something steadier formed. Resolve. If they thought I would let them strip me of everything, my money, my children's dignity, my identity, they had underestimated me. That night, when the house was quiet, I lit a single candle on my desk and opened my journal. For years, I had avoided writing about them, afraid that putting the words on paper would make the pain permanent. But now the pen moved fast, pouring out truths I had carried too long. They never saw me. They never wanted me. But I am still here, and I am stronger than they ever imagined. Tears blurred the page, but this time they weren't tears of weakness. They were release. For the first time, crying didn't make me feel small. It made me feel free. I closed the journal and looked at the stack of evidence on the table, the glow of the candle flickering across it. My children slept peacefully upstairs, unaware that a war was being drawn quietly beneath them. I touched the folder and whispered, "This ends now." I thought of the video on my phone, the documents in my hands, the community of survivors online who had already shown me the way, and then the thought crystallized, sharp and unshakable. This time, Claire wouldn't just survive. She would expose them. The first step was silent, almost anticlimactic. One morning, I called the bank and terminated every automatic transfer that had been feeding my parents' accounts. I closed the joint fund they had convinced me to open years ago, the one for their future security. My hands trembled as I signed the final form, but when the banker slid the paperwork back to me, stamped complete, I felt something lift off my chest. For the first time in decades, they had no control over me. I waited for the fallout. It came quickly. My mother called the next evening, her voice sharp, brittle with panic. "Claire, there's a mistake with the bank. The money didn't come through. Fix it." I said nothing. The silence stretched long enough for her voice to crack. "You're ungrateful. After everything we've done for you—" Click. I ended the call. My hands still shook, but not from fear, from power. The second step was louder. I uploaded the Thanksgiving video. Not under my name, not under any account tied to me. I created a fresh profile with no history and titled the video simply, "When Parents Choose Favorites." I pressed upload and sat back, my heart racing. At first, nothing happened. A few views, a couple of comments. But within hours, the numbers climbed. Thousands, then tens of thousands. By the next morning, the clip had gone viral. Millions of views. The comments exploded with outrage. "This is abuse. Those poor kids. How can anyone say this out loud at Thanksgiving? Protect your children. Cut them off." I read them all, tears stinging my eyes, not from sadness, but from validation. For years, I had been gaslit into believing I was too sensitive, too dramatic. Now the world was telling me the truth. It was never me. It was them. The fallout hit my parents like a storm. Their friends stopped commenting on their perfect family posts. Neighbors whispered. At the grocery store, people stared. They called me that night, both of them on speaker, their voices frantic. "Claire, how could you do this to us? You ruined our reputation. You made us look like monsters." I closed my eyes, the phone pressed to my ear, and listened not with guilt, but with clarity. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were only sorry for being seen. "Goodbye," I whispered, and ended the call. The chaos didn't stop there. Michael stormed into the narrative like gasoline on fire. When he learned the full truth, that the money I had sent for years had been funneled into his life, into the house in his name, his perfect facade cracked. He called me, his voice thick with anger, not at me, but at them. "They used me, Claire. They made me believe I was their pride, their everything, but I was just the bait. You were the one funding it all." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he had benefited from my erasure for years, but his voice shook with betrayal I recognized all too well. For the first time, Michael was no longer the golden child. He was just another pawn. At home, I tried to shield my children from the whirlwind. One weekend, I packed a picnic basket, loaded them into the car, and drove out to the park. The sun was warm, the air smelled of grass and freedom. Emma and my son chased each other across the field, their laughter bright and unbroken. I sat on the blanket, watching, my chest swelling with something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. "You're smiling, Mom," Emma said, running back to me with flushed cheeks. Like really smiling. I pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "That's because I'm free," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if she understood. For those few hours, the chaos faded. It was just us, a small family whole and enough, finally untouched by judgment. But peace never lasts long in the middle of war. When we returned home, my phone buzzed with notifications. I opened it and froze. A local newspaper headline flashed across the screen. "The Anderson family's secret favoritism scandal exposed." They weren't just a private disgrace anymore. They were a public story. The storm didn't pass quickly. It lingered for weeks, unraveling the Anderson name like thread from a frayed sweater. Friends who once admired my parents withdrew silently, neighbors crossed the street to avoid them, and relatives who had clung to the illusion of a perfect family now whispered their disgust. The pedestal they had built for themselves collapsed, leaving only dust. Without me as the scapegoat, they had no one left to blame. Every argument between them turned louder, spilling into public scenes at the market, in the church foyer. The family throne they had guarded so fiercely had rotted from within, and now everyone could see it. Meanwhile, my life grew lighter. The mornings weren't weighted with dread. My phone no longer buzzed with demands for money or guilt-laden reminders of duty. I walked through my own home feeling, for the first time, that it belonged fully to me and my children, not tethered to the strings of obligation my parents had pulled for decades. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was a number I knew too well. Against my better judgment, I answered. My mother's voice cracked through the speaker, raw in a way I had never heard before. "Claire," she whispered, "please, we need to see you. Just once. We can fix this. We're still your parents." I closed my eyes, memories flooding back. Thanksgiving humiliation, whispered comparisons, my son's trembling voice asking if he was a mistake. Their pleas meant nothing against the years of scars. "No," I said simply. My voice didn't tremble. For the first time in my life, I placed a boundary they could not cross. There was silence. Then a sob, before the line went dead. I set the phone down, my chest rising steady. That night, I slept without nightmares. The next morning, as I sipped coffee, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number with a message. "Your story saved my life. Thank you." I stared at the words, my throat tightening. A stranger, someone out there in the vast digital sea, had seen themselves in my pain and found strength in my escape. Suddenly, the years of shame and silence no longer felt wasted. They had become a lifeline for someone else. It was then I understood. My story wasn't just about surviving. It was about transforming pain into something that could light the path for others. I began to write, slowly at first, short posts, comments on forums, anonymous advice to people caught in the same traps I had lived through. Then essays, full accounts of what it meant to grow up erased and what it took to claim myself again. Each word lifted the weight from me and, at the same time, built a bridge for others still trapped in their own cages. But healing wasn't just for the outside world. It was for us, me, and my children. I began hosting small dinners with friends who had become like siblings, people who saw me without conditions, who loved my children as their own. Our house filled with laughter that wasn't forced, with hugs that weren't calculated. For the first time, I felt what family should be, not the one I was born into, but the one I chose. One Saturday, I drove the kids to the coast. The ocean stretched endless before us, the waves crashing like the world was washing itself clean. Emma held my hand as we walked the shoreline, her hair flying wild in the wind. My son raced ahead, chasing gulls, his laughter sharp and free. We spread a blanket on the sand, the sun warm on our skin. I leaned back, watching their joy spill out in unrestrained bursts, and I felt something settle deep inside me. Peace. Not fragile, not temporary, real. Emma crawled into my lap, resting her head on my chest. "Mom," she whispered, "we're happy, right?" I wrapped my arms around her, my eyes on my son darting through the waves. "Yes," I said softly, pressing my lips to her forehead. "We are our own family, and we are enough." The horizon glowed gold as the sun sank lower, and I knew the story wasn't ending. Not really. It was unfolding into something new, something stronger. I didn't need revenge to feel whole. My freedom, my children's laughter, the legacy of love I was building, that was victory enough. And as the tide rolled in, I understood that the greatest justice wasn't their downfall. It was our rebirth.